microphone is working. Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. It's pretty exciting.
Hello.
To meet all of you.
Hi.
We're all here, developer, publisher for mobile games. And I would like to each and every one of us to introduce himself. That would be great. A little bit about me. I'm in the industry of mobile games since 2006. I've been a part of selling 2 companies in the days that we distributed mobile games in the Java days. Our last company, D-Media, has reached with our blockbuster Trial Extreme series to 200 million downloads, which is our biggest success.
Hi, I'm Mo Mohammed. I'm the CEO of Magmic. I've been working in the mobile game industry for 11 years now. Started off as a Java 2 micro edition developer. Anybody who was back then knows that. And so I work at a boutique independent card game and board game publisher and developer based out of Ottawa, Canada.
Hi, I'm Graciela Ruiz. I'm an associate producer at Telltale Games. I've been in the industry for a shorter period of time than most of you all. I've been a producer for about 3 years, but we focus mostly on narrative games, and I just have a really strong passion for narrative games.
Hi, I'm Tara Mustafa. I've been in the industry for over 14 years. I've had my background in design and production from AAA studios to mobile games, and currently I'm founding my own studio called Mischief Games, where we're focusing on diversity and studio culture as a priority.
Great. So, first question for you guys. As game developer and publisher, what is your biggest and most painful challenges? And how did you try to deal with it, and did it work? Anyone?
Developing game concepts that will actually make money. I think that's the #1 challenge in the industry.
Yes.
Then after you have a game that actually does well, acquiring users to get into that game is probably the second largest challenge. I'd say that's certainly the biggest hurdle for most people coming in. It used to be back in the day, especially in mobile, you release and forget. That was kind of how it worked. But now just releasing a game is the beginning of everything. So yeah, I think that's the hardest thing to do, is killing a game, because you have to move on to the next thing, I think. If making a game that's successful is difficult in itself, but you also have to be able to let go of that game. So those are the hardest things, I think, to do in this industry.
Right.
For me, I think one of the hardest things as a producer is managing change. With narrative games, iteration is a pretty natural part of the creative process, and part of my job is trying to predict the size and the scope of the product that you're creating, and sometimes it's still pretty ambiguous at the start of what are you actually building. So this past year, I spent time working on Batman: The Enemy Within, and it's a 5-episode season, and we had an idea of where our season was going. We knew the overarching story, and we knew the general things that were going to take place in each episode, but the finale episode turned out to be way larger than we originally planned for. So the challenge for me was to roll up my sleeves and kind of revisit our entire schedule and strategy of how we're going to build this game. Kind of the nature of our games is they're branched, and there's multiple endings, and the choices you make as a player completely change the outcome of the end of the game, so that's hard to predict. How do you manage the scope of such an evolving product? So we ended up having to, we invested more into this product because the script was a lot larger than we originally planned for. We ended up increasing the size of our team and shuffling around our dates and sort of just going all in on it, and it resulted in a really awesome product that we really were proud of.
Sounds great. So, I mean, for us, we have a team here, we have a team in Israel, we have a big team, 17 people sitting in St. Petersburg, and we have to be profitable. So it was all about being positive, ROI positive. And the cycle is not easy. The user acquisition cost the CPI is getting higher because of the big ones that are, there is a consolidation and they're being, controlling the market. So we have to deal with, we had a lot of traffic. We were pretty good when it comes to retention and the session duration, but we've came to the point that the ARPU was not good enough. So it was a few years back, 3 years ago, and we had to improve it. And the only way that we found out it was working for us is also to find the best tool for us, also to improve, the interaction with our users. Of course, to continuously improve and update the version and the monetization model. And then we were very concentrating and focused on getting it higher. And that's what makes us, still happy, live, and lifestyle company doing games, which is a dream come true.
Yeah, and then from the design side, or an indie developer, everything's a challenge, everything. But one of the big things is that you've got to make sure you're partnered with the right investors and prepared to put time into that investment or publishing relationship, because I can sit here as a designer and go, okay, I know exactly what kind of game I'm going to make. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be fun. My brother's going to love it. My mother's going to love it. I know exactly how the mechanics are going to work. It's great. But then when you're talking to investors and your publishers, you kind of lose sight of that fun aspect, and you get into this, got the jazz hands. I'm going to sell you how this is going to go, and I'm going to say yes to everything. And you'll find yourself maybe in situations, because you're trying to get investment, working with people who maybe haven't had experience in tech, and they think everything is easy and fast, and their cousin's neighbor's son who likes green says everything should be green. And you're like, okay, I'm going to say yes to that, yes to that, yes to that. And suddenly you're in this situation where you've agreed to things that you don't necessarily want to do. So you have to stay really clear and focused about what your objectives are in your product, who you're partnering with when it comes to investment, and if you're willing to take that time to walk them through what the process is of how hard it is to change one button, where it is on the whole UI experience, where it leads to, because there are 1,000,010 decisions, and sometimes they don't appreciate what goes behind that thinking. And when you're wearing many hats, you're the CEO, CCO, and you're the designer, and you're also your lead QA, is that time that you can afford to give up, and is that relationship worth it in the long run? So I think that's a big challenge that we face. Yeah.
I want to say something with regards to where you mentioned investors. So I hope there's not investors in the room. So I'm happy to say that DMedia is a company that has been working, monetizing, generating revenues, profitable from doing mobile games without any investors, and this is really, really happy, for us, in the life ongoing way we conduct the business. So we can totally concentrate on what we believe in, what we do, and we constantly, with the data, with the tool that we use, checking, what we're doing in the game and if it's working or not. And if you do an update, and then you have to see, the information back from the data and see that it's relevant or not, and you take decision upon as much as possible data-oriented, not just, we used to do, the time that you say, oh, I want to do this, and the team said, oh, this is amazing, let's do this design, let's do this green, white, yellow, car, jumping. It's basically trying, and today, I think you guys might agree with me, is we're moving more and more to the time that we can actually test, A/B tests, and make sure that we're doing, the right thing for the users. So let's move on, because I have a lot of questions, and it takes a while. Can you share a failure, a real failure, which is something that none of us really likes to do, but we're here talking with developers and publishers, and we are here to talk openly. And not only a failure, but what you've done with it, did you overcome it, how?
Oh, just to carry on from your point, because my failures relate to testing and A/B testing, and actually I have a lot of failures, but one in particular is I've worked in several scenarios where pertaining to your investors and your publishers and stuff like that, you're so focused on meeting a milestone and saying, I've launched something, that you kind of forget how important testing is, because you're just rushing to get features in and get to completion. Oh, no. And it's important. You're going to miss a million things when you put it into the hands of somebody else. And I can't say this enough, and I know people say it a lot, is test early, test often. So I think that's really critical, and I think it's important as publishers or investors that you push for that as well. with the dev teams that you're working with. You got to understand that that's a critical piece of information, and then to react calmly, not change everything to that. Because yeah, there's been a couple of scenarios where you're so deep into production and you can't come up for air, and you're having people just tell you this needs to change, this needs to change, and you start reacting, and then the product becomes watered down, and it's not the success that you dream that it would be. Yeah.
I think it's related also to being stressful to go live, right? To release it, because we've been working for years now, or not years, but months. Sometimes 1 year passed and you have to release it, and then you start making mistakes, right?
I mean, speaking of failure, from our perspective, I'd say 70% of my games have failed, you know, and I think that's pretty common in this industry. Where we did a whole social casino line; they don't exist anymore. But we've had many games that have failed, and I think it's part of this industry that you have to kind of understand. That's the nature of it, and you just have to be able to let go, right? You know, we make games. It's a very creative industry. A lot of your heart and soul and passion goes into it. I find that a lot of developers, it's just very hard for them to just let go, right? Sometimes you make a game that you're making it for yourself, but really you're making it for other people. So you release it to the store and you realize, maybe the other people don't really like it so much, you know? And it's a challenge, because sometimes it's hard to take that personally. You've seen many companies just double down, you know, port it to other platforms, you know, add features, when really the right decision was you just kill it and move on to the next game. So I think that's the hardest thing. It's been hard even for our company to grasp that, you know, where you've invested a whole bunch of money and you know you're never going to make it back. But I think, you know, focus, learning from that, you know, taking, you know, code that you've developed for that game, using it in the next game, you know, maybe reusing assets, just keep on trying. It's really important to soft launch, I find, for mobile. You know, check your KPIs, your day 1, your day 7, your day 30, you know, 40, 20, 10, that's kind of average what you want. You know, work on your day 1 funnel, and then work on your day 7, and then work on your day 30. If you get those KPIs right, then, you know, perhaps this game is gonna work. You can launch it. But, you know, my piece of advice is just, you know, learn from your mistakes and just adapt what you've learned to the next thing, and keep on trying. But yeah, because we've all been there, and certainly most games will fail. Absolutely, it's a huge industry, and there's hundreds of games get submitted every week. So, you know, not everybody makes it. I think we were talking about that a bit earlier. It's like, gone are the days where you'd release a game and you know, you made tons and tons of money off of it. You really kind of have to just throw it out there, see what sticks, and then iterate on that.
Yeah, I feel like every time you fail or you make a big mistake, it's just an opportunity to improve your process, or to take that lesson, as you said, and apply it to the next product. On Batman Season 1, one of our biggest failures was performance. So that was something that a big lesson that we took into Season 2 was, how can we make sure that this is the best performing and optimized game possible? And at Telltale, we have a lot of products in development all at the same time. So at the time, we had Walking Dead Season 3 and Guardians of the Galaxy Season 1 going on. So we started looking at the performance of those games and seeing how we could take lessons from our fellow developers and apply them to our season, and share their success. So I think just talking to other developers, trying to figure out how other people are solving the problems, and then applying those lessons to your product so that you can really improve.
I want to take what you just mentioned about checking day 1, day 7. This is so great. We so agree. That's definitely a great way to do it. How do we define a successful game? I mean, when do we decide that this game is going to the drain, pardon my language, but this is not going to work, let's archive it? We've been working for a few months, but what's the definition? What's the right time?
It depends how big your studio is. You know, I've seen large studios, well, just can a game, even if it's making, you know, a few $100,000 a month. Whereas, you know, for an indie, that's great. They could totally live off of that. So it depends on your size, your overhead, you know, how much it actually costs to maintain and run that game for you. But certainly, like, for us, the first metric is obviously the retention we look at, because then, you know, we can actually grow a user base if we decide to buy. But you have to buy. Nowadays UA is really, the App Store discoverability on it is not that great. So you get that 40-20-10 retention, and then you push a big UA campaign, and then you start to look at your LTV. Does it make sense? Measure that. And then if you have a CPI less than LTV, if you can get traffic cheap enough, then really it's a no-brainer. I think that's what a lot of the big studios do these days. You look at some of the largest ones like Supercell, they really only manage 4 games, 5 games. So I think that's the strategy. I think that mobile is now kind of been pushed towards. So I really think that those 3 key metrics, the day 1, day 7, day 30, those are key, at least in your soft launch, to measure. You don't really need to worry about monetization. You can kind of work that in, add some more metagame features to kind of, extract some more revenue. But as long as people are enjoying your game and coming back, I think that's the number one thing that you should focus on.
I might be a little controversial here, or maybe a little idealistic, but I think one of the critical things in this is talking about what do you as developers define as success? Maybe you're all here because it's all about money and the retention and conversion and those kind of stats, or are you here, or are you making these games because? See, I am idealistic.
You have a passion for it.
I was too.
Because you want that quality experience. You want to tell the story. You want to engage with your audience. You want to make them feel something. God, you can tell I'm a designer. So, if you look at games like Florence, which was a great success, but it's also a critical darling, it doesn't necessarily have the replayability and the monetization that Clash and all of these other games have. But to me, like if I made that game, I would consider that a success. I would walk away going, look what I did, And I think as developers, you've got to, if you got into the games for the same reasons I do, then you've got to stick to that kind of passion, and it'll come through in your product. Yeah.
So may I ask her a question? Like, what would you consider failure then, if that success is making a game that you...
It's all relative to you. But it's been interesting because, I've been lucky enough to participate in some juries in the past year, especially at BAFTA, and there are so many really interesting games that are, I don't remember what the term for it is. I think Oscar probably does, but games as a experience, is it, or something, where you like that Dragon Cancer, those kind of experiences,
right,
which aren't about the bottom line.
Let's not be afraid to use the word art. Go on, we can use the word art. We're allowed.
Games as art.
Games as art.
So there you go.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. Actually, I really look at how we're making our players feel. At the end of the day, it's like I would like to look at Let's Plays and see those reactions, see people when they're really excited, or when they're really moved, or when they're really grossed out, and then how did the developers feel? Are the developers proud of what they did, or did they crunch the whole time and frustrated that the great idea that they had didn't get in, and it would have been such a better product if X, Y, Z. But at the end of the day, if your players are super excited and pumped, even if your player base is small, you have that core group of fans who are just super pumped and excited about what you're making, and they're begging for the next thing. That's what drives us as creators. And then your developers, when they're proud of what they did, they're proud that they got to polish something, That's how I measure success.
I can't agree more. I think developers, our studio, engineering developers, and our art designers, and they have to be happy with what they do. But I met so many friends and colleagues along the year that had amazing games out there, and they had to close their dream in studios just because they did manage to, pay salaries. So definitely there's a balance. Yeah, we have to find it between, doing games is it's the best. I think it's the best industry in the world. That's why I'm here for so long. I was thinking about leaving it for a while, but yeah, got back because it's fun. It's creative. There's an amazing opportunity for every game. Every product. But yeah, we have to be smart along the way, and as you mentioned.
Because it is tough.
Yes.
It's extremely low barriers to entry now, and there's a lot of failure. But you're right. I think that in and of itself, as long as you don't give up and you keep trying, put your heart and soul into it, which makes it quite hard to let go of the game. You know, so there you go. It's like that kind of vicious loop, right? So yeah, but it certainly is fun and rewarding, absolutely. When you have that success to it, finally, it works out.
So my next question is about KPIs. I'm a big believer, and I see that you're also really connected to that. What do you think is the most hardest KPI to improve out of our options? There's KPIs dealing with retention, and the game performance, and there's also the money KPIs. What would be the hardest for you guys that you've been experiencing in the last day work?
I don't know if you'd count downloads as a KPI, perhaps that, plus retention, new users,
acquiring new users, okay.
And mobile. I think the recent App Store changes have made discoverability even worse, unless you are creating basically games that Apple wants to feature, which is premium games these days. So I think you're seeing that now, especially with Apple search ads. People are buying your keywords, so people are buying your app names, even if you have a brand. You're seeing that happen quite a lot. So if you search for our games, you'll see Yahtzee is the number one, because they're buying our spots. So I think that those things in tandem have really kind of put even more pressure on players and people and publishers to, find alternate means of getting users. But I think generally that's the thing, is a lot of games are still coming out. A lot of people are still pumping out content. There's a lot of great content coming out there, and just there's more and more competition for people's attention. And so that's really, you're starting to see that the organic slide quite a bit. And then retention obviously is making a game that people want to come back to and play. There's so many factors, it's kind of hard, which is why we take the approach of, lean, get it out there and let the users kind of speak using analytics to see, do they actually like this game, is it sticky, working on that. I think that's the most difficult, because retention really ties into your core loops of your game, and your metagame, so it's quite the most expensive thing to fix as well. So those are the two metrics that we track quite a lot, that really care about affect performance in the end.
To touch on conversion and retention as well, from a development perspective, streaming has introduced big challenges of, you have to think as a content creator, how can I make this game more fun to play than it is to watch? So you're thinking about what can we do to make this player watch this game on the stream and say, oh, I want to know what my play experience is going to be like. How is my personal experience going to be different than the streamer's experience? And make them feel so interested and intrigued in that they actually go and buy the game. So that's something that we're really focusing on right now, is we really want our players to play our game opposed to just watching other people play your game.
I think that there's going to be an interesting shift across mobile games, or games in general, when it comes to finances and microtransactions, especially when it comes to, I think, the recent legislation in Belgium that have said loot boxes, gachapon, not allowed. So it's going to have to affect the whole way design creates these systems in order to get players to convert and to spend. And just one more thing on KPIs and design. I had one experience where I was working on it was a Facebook title, and we were having 60% of the players drop off after the first 5 minutes. And everybody was coming at us saying, you got to change the health of the characters, you got to change the drop rate of certain items, you got to change the health potions, you got to change the level design, everything. And then what we found out was, if we had this NIS at the beginning of the game, which was 4 minutes long. So we cut that to 30 seconds. People weren't dropping off all of a sudden, right? But if we'd panicked and changed all of these stats and the balance of the game, that would have had huge ramifications for the entire title and cost in terms of development cycle and things like that. So I'd say always take some time to investigate what's triggering all of these effects, and don't be so quick to react.
Thank you. I want to take your last mentioning about releasing a game, and so what's the ideal way or the best way, from your point of view, to release a game?
I think you just copy what everybody else does. It seems to be what works. You know, soft launch, buy some users.
You were making Tara feel bad
but what you just said, you basically, you were analyzing your day one retention. You were looking at your first-time user experience funnel, and you were looking at the churn from each step, right? And that's exactly what you should be doing. And you realize there's a huge drop-off between here and here, so you fix that, right? So day 1, day 7, day 30, I think that's like the steps you take. But just like, that's exactly what everybody does, is they'll soft launch it, they'll spend some money, $5,000 or $10,000, get some users in there, look at the KPIs, and then they basically have a certain limit. Okay, that looks good for us. Let's push it worldwide, pump it, or kill it, and then move on to the next.
Mentioning soft launch, what's the best way to do that? There's different ways to do it.
So what we've been told the best way to do it is go to Southeast Asia, actually. So they think, like, countries like Philippines, Vietnam, Philippines has very high English, so everybody speaks English there. So it's actually, and it's kind of like far away from North America. So if you're a North American company, that's usually a very good country to kind of like start in. And then you roll it out to more of the English-speaking countries, the UK, US, UK, New Zealand. You kind of like roll it out that way. So I think, Southeast Asia to start, and then roll it out to other English countries. It's usually a good way to do it. That's particularly how we approach it.
Cool.
Our games are pretty different because once it's released, we don't really change the core content. It's mostly like bug fixing and polishing based on user reports, but I guess most of our release strategies come, like, our initial release is like the release, so it's not really a live product, so our experiences is different. But the main advice I would have for releasing a product is really focusing on iteration. As you said, like testing early, I think it goes hand in hand with that. Is a lot of times you might look at the big picture schedule, and you really want to make sure that you're building in enough time to iterate and do multiple versions of your product. And if you find yourself seeing that you don't have enough time for enough iteration, chances are you're taking on too much. So it's probably worth it for you to scope down your product and build something smaller that'll give you the opportunity to rev on it more times, so that you can have a more polished product. That's my advice.
I couldn't agree more with what you both have said. Soft launch, target Southeast Asia, iterate. I think also having a really clear release plan, a post-launch plan, knowing what you're going to do, for your next versions. And when you're scoping, start really small as a developer, figure out what that core game loop is, perfect that before adding all of the bells and whistles and other features, because you need that to be validated and you need it to resonate with your user base. So.
Great. So the mobile games market is huge, and there's the big opportunity, and the world of mobile games has changed a lot in the past few years. What is your view about what we had before, the success for all? Everyone could upload a game and you can become pretty much a millionaire. The world has changed. Is it still this, or we're now moving to this stage that only the big ones are going to reach the audience and generate the revenues? What do you think about that? You still have a chance.
You do. You still have a chance, because there's a lot of people who make great games out there, and that's the first part. But then the second part is the discoverability, so finding users. If you're lucky, it really doesn't happen much, and relying on the App Store for your discoverability is probably not a great idea. You might get a feature from Apple, but it's not as strong as it used to be. In the early days, you got a feature, you got millions of downloads.
Definitely.
Now you may get 100,000 if you're lucky, if you're front page. So I think there is chance. You just need discoverability in some way. I think most of the indie games or the small games that do really well do well because of word of mouth, right? So and that's how they're being discovered. So you need discoverability, whether it's word of mouth, it's gone viral, kids are talking about it in the playground, everybody's playing it, to buying tons of ads, which is what the big companies do because they can afford it, or something. So you need to kind of figure out discoverability part. If you get that, somehow you're lucky, you're a famous YouTuber, talks about your game, well, Flappy Wings there. Flappy Bird, sorry, it will do well. Yeah. So I think there is chance. It is difficult though, for sure.
I'm a dreamer, so I think that you still got a chance. I think what you said about word of mouth and going viral, I think is key. And as a developer, you really just have to focus on building the best product you can and trying to execute on a really innovative idea and do something that's not currently being done or do it a lot better. I think there's a lot of opportunity in the narrative space to do that because I think video games as a storytelling medium is still pretty young. So if you're interested in narrative and you tell an amazing story and you execute on it really, really well and you make players feel something, I think you have a really high likelihood of catching word of mouth in the indie market and getting some kind of natural, organic reach. So I would just stick to the guns of developing a really great product.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be in trouble if I didn't think that the indies could succeed because I'd just be failing already. And yeah, just to speak to your point.
And close the business.
Yeah, exactly. I left, close the business. Discoverability, yeah, streaming. I think like Hatch have developed a platform where you can stream mobile games, and that's really interesting product offering. Social networks, all of that. Don't underestimate how much time and effort that takes in getting your message clear and consistent across all of these platforms for your product. What voice are you using? Is it the voice of the company? Is it the voice of yourself or the voice of your business self? The line for me is blurred, as you can tell from this talk. Yeah, and I think being genuine when you engage with your community and building that up from the grassroots level is really important. So ensures success, yeah.
So my view is definitely we have a chance. The amount of developers that are generating more than $1 million, a year a month is growing, is tripling as we speak. Yeah, the only way is to do it right, to do it smart, to do it, to pick the right tool to help you. We're using, for example, after exploring the whole market for years, we're using Game of Whales for us, and it's working great. Iteration, interactions with the user, discussion and improvement constantly, different version, improved, the soft launch. I think what Mohammed said about, following your attention first and then take a decision from there, not to be obsessed about my monetization model. This is definitely something you can improve. We believe in improvement, an ongoing improvement. We have to try. If you see that the KPIs are at the beginning are doing well, if you see there's a spark of opportunity over there, you only need to take it forward and do it smart. And again, using the smart tool, and yeah, we're going to get there. That's it from us. That's for my questions. Any questions for you guys?
Great, thank you very much. So, guys, have you got any questions? There's a question over there. I will run over. See, this is how I get my exercise. Handing over. Yeah, so it's much better if I do the mic. Thank you.
Yeah, actually, I have a two-part question. So the first part is, as a developer, how do you decide, because we have a good mix here, of whether you're going to do a free-to-play and monetize in the game or a premium game? And then the other part is in regards to discoverability, how do you decide your best route? Is it going to be a paid UA through some type of ad network or influencers, etc.?
So for us, we do free-to-play for years now because we've realized that this model is like an endless opportunity for each user to pay, and we've seen it, and we're so proud of our big whales, and whales are important, and these are the users that are paid. Depends on the game, right? Tens of thousands each user, so definitely free-to-play because again, endless opportunity, and definitely a problem with user acquisition, and I think that was the second question. So focusing on bringing the ARPU so we can, compete or be outright positive, as I mentioned, to the CPI. That's growing as we speak, but definitely there's, the Facebook, and we use different, tools in order to get and reach this, and that's definitely smart to make sure that you don't spend more than what you achieve and generate.
Yeah, in terms of whether you're free to play or premium product, I think that's a question of for me, how elegant is your design? Does it speak to, I mean, if it's a live services kind of game, there's tons of opportunities to integrate free-to-play monetization strategies. If it's, a condensed 4-hour experience and there's no extra features to that, then, it makes sense to go premium. But yeah, I think it really depends on those opportunities that are offered and that kind of quality of experience that you want to offer within your game.
For free-to-play, we've experimented with having the first episode of the season be free to try and hook the player, and then with the intent that hopefully we'll convert them to paid customers. Hopefully they'd want to pay for the following episodes. And then from how do we get more customers, we look at influencers a lot. We try to we look at the reaction of our of the streamers. So we hope that the reactions from our streamers would help publicize our games.
Such a loaded question.
No, it's a hard one.
We're always free to play. Just that's the nature of our business. We have technology around it. So we made a conscious decision at one point, like, okay, we're only free to play. And it's interesting because we also do branded content. So we make games for Mattel and Hasbro, and they're also all free to play. I do know of companies who have worked with, Disney Interactive, for example. It's like, you can't. They won't let you make free to play, for example, on their brands. Mm-hmm. So, it can depend. It could be like the licensor saying you have to do it this way. But I think if you want to make, it's really difficult. I mean, it's tough in the industry, and I think if you go premium one-time purchase, it's even more difficult. It's a huge gate for people. It has to be quite compelling content, like you're saying, and Monument Valley, everybody's example there, right? So it's really compelling content, beautiful art. I think those kind of do well. I mean, Apple likes the one-time purchase. You're way more likely to get featured if you go one-time purchase with Apple. But right, that is your LTV. So whatever people pay, $3.99 or $4.99. See, I think it's a really personal question depending on the type of game that you develop. And in terms of UA, personally, we do a lot of Facebook and ad networks, but Facebook is really good if you have any kind of email logins, or you can build a lookalike audience. You can really drive down your costs. That's why they're making a ton of money. I think everybody's using Facebook. So that would be, if you have a small budget, I recommend just buy on Facebook, basically. If you integrate their SDK, it will do a free attribution. It will track everything for you. So yeah, you can just link it up. So it's really difficult, but you do have to make the decision at the get-go, because if you are going to go free to play, you have to design your core loops around that, right? So basically the game has to be designed for free to play. It's not something you can just tack on in the end, right? So everything in your game and your meta game has to be designed and balanced around that. So make that decision at the beginning. I do recommend on mobile, that is where the industry is. So if anybody were to ask me personally, this is not me giving professional advice, but personal advice, I'd say definitely do free to play if you want to make money in mobile. If you want to make a premium game, and we've seen this a lot in Canada, there's a lot of companies moved out of mobile and are doing Steam PC games, and I think that's the platform for one-time purchase versus mobile, personally, my opinion.
Cool, one more.
So my question is, assuming we have a small studio of, say, 3 or 4 people, and we're looking at, say, building a free-to-play game for mobile, and we're looking at kind of different types of genres and game designs to tackle. From a more commercial standpoint, since making money is so challenging, now how do you choose, right? Because if let's assume I want to make a battle royale game today, well, that's probably not a good idea. But then, on the other hand, you can pick a market that's so niche that you couldn't do a free-to-play successfully. So if you can talk a little bit about how you guys think about, hey, this game, from the very get-go, has at least some degree of viability. Thank you.
So we've been doing tons of mobile games. So like I said, 70% of our games never made money. So we did Social Casino, we did Match 3, we did side scrollers, we did like everything, right? We only do card and board games now because, like you said, we found our niche, and I think it's kind of important to find a niche because it makes subsequent developments cheaper, faster. You can iterate faster. You can, do that, drop the game a lot easier, make the decision. So I do think that you do need to find your niche right now. You do need to look at those really busy sections, like if it's Battle Royale. How much is it going to be to buy a user, right? I mean, we dropped our casino line because male 18 to 35 is the most expensive demo to buy users for.
Right.
It just didn't make any sense, even if the games had good KPIs. So we kind of look at that. We do cards. It's cheap to buy users. Really, from what we've found is we have really high long-term retention. Some people playing our card games for over 5 years, which you don't really see in some other games. So yeah, I think it really kind of matters of what your goals are, what that niche is, how much is it going to cost to develop for it, and if you do find a right niche with the right model, I think you can still be very successful. And that's one of the things I think you really should do is focus in on an aspect and try to avoid the busy markets, because the big guys, you can't compete with them. A Battle Royale now you have Fortnite, you have PUBG, you have all of these big companies kind of coming in. So it's really expensive to acquire in that space.
We still have time because I see a big zero here.
I think we're all good. Any other responses to that particular question?
Yeah, specifically for that question, for us, for example, at work, the Trial Extreme is a very specific, genre. It's a hardcore game. It's not not for everyone to try. Everyone can try it. It's really cool. Competition, tournaments. It's about a specific, very loyal audience, and we've seen this audience move like millions of users move from one, first Trial Extreme to the second into the third Trial Extreme. So that worked really well for us at this. But we did try different genres, and we did. I'm happy to say we succeeded in some other, cool casual. Office Quest was the name of it, with a few millions also downloads. But I do agree with Mohammed. You have to find, your way and to concentrate, because besides for the fact that you can, cross promote if you have the right audience and you move them from one game to another successful game, while if you would have, different genres, there is no way to take, if the audience is 25 years women, taking them to play maybe a bike game would not, be so successful. So concentrating is important. I've seen we've been, trying so many things, and it took us a lot of resources. So being able to figure out and to find where you're doing well, and where your retention and the crowd love it, and you love the game, and that would be really smart to concentrate on, and not all over the place. That's for me.
Any other thoughts? I can just about squeeze them in. No, I think that sounds what I've done. I mean, I think thank you very much, guys, for that. I think what you kind of demonstrated to me is it's about focus, it's about paying attention to the numbers, but it's about executing flawlessly. And the only way we can get to execute flawlessly is if we know where the mistakes are, and that comes from actually having to go through them and make those mistakes. And so on that note, thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.